Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Harper-Desir. I'm a local arts activist and community organizer. Good morning and welcome to this panel. It's going to be a good show. Should be educational. I'm going to start the space with to urge everyone to recognize and acknowledge the labor upon which our country, state, and institutions are built. Remember that our country is built on the labor of enslaved people who were kidnapped and brought to the U.S. from the African continent, and recognize the continued contribution of their survivors. We acknowledge all immigrant labor, including voluntary, involuntary, and trafficked peoples who continue to serve within our labor force. I also want to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the present and unceded homeland territory of the Wiyot people. We encourage direct giving to tribes and Native-led efforts. Tribes and nations in Humboldt County include Hupa, Karuk, Matol, Tolowa, Waileki, and the Wiyot in the Yurok. I'm making this land acknowledgement in recognition that our words must be matched by action and approach. Land does not require that you confirm it's been stolen, rather that you reciprocate that care that it has given you. The first step is acknowledgement. The next step involves treating territory as kin, building relationships with the land and the indigenous peoples that own this land, and to acknowledge the land on its own terms to act in reciprocity. You can learn more by directly from your local indigenous communities, and I urge you to honor them monetarily through an honor tax.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lorna Bryant. I am a community member here in Humboldt County. I've lived here for the past, this go round since 2007. I'm a former radio producer. I'm a current activist, and most recently, the second vice president of the Eureka NAACP. Thank you. I am passionate about being Black. I am passionate about being a Black woman. And I am ecstatic to be here with these other Black women. And I will hand it off to you, Mo, to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Harper-Desir. I am also a community member here. I'm from the East Coast originally. I've lived here for about 8 years. In the community, I am the co-founder of Black Humboldt, alongside my sister in Seoul, Diana and Lovu. And I also work at Access Humboldt. And I also do a lot of arts education in the TK through 12 schools all over Humboldt County.
My name is Florence Parks. I'm the executive director for Big Brothers Big Sisters. I'm relatively new to Humboldt. I came here in 2019. My husband just graduated from Cal Poly Humboldt. I know some people, that's not the name you're comfortable with, but and I am a wife to a beautiful Black man, and I have 2 beautiful Black children, 3, a third one that I adopted, but and is part of our family, but 2 biological daughters, and they are queens. And also, one is 8 and attends Lafayette here and has gone to school since the beginning of her educational career. Outside of that, I also am part of the California Mentoring Partnership, which is a statewide mentoring effort. And I run I'm part of the racial justice group for our state when it comes to mentoring. And what I'm most passionate about is ensuring that our kids have protective webs and belongingness after coming from a fatherless upbringing and understanding how mass incarceration and drug wars has impacted our community. And so I am passionate about mentoring and ensuring that everyone has a chance to have the best people surrounding them and supporting them.
Hi, I'm Ina. I'm a student at Cal Poly Humboldt. I'm a freshman, so yes, I've always been a Cal Poly Humboldt kid. I am going, just basically, I moved up here in August to come here, and I'm just very new to Humboldt, so I'm just a little brand new baby up here. But I was one of the organizers for the student-led protest at Cal Poly Humboldt for the housing crisis. And so that is how I got connected with Black Humboldt. And so yeah, I'm really glad to be around these lovely ladies and just help share about my story and how Harriet Tubman has affected me in different ways. So yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Nikki Valencia. I've been living here since 2020. I am a community member. I've led the first protest in Kimmyville in 2020. I am a very outspoken racial activist, a racial justice activist locally, specifically in Arcata. I'm also a local artist, and I collaborate with other BIPOC. I would definitely say a really big aspect of me as far as like being a community member is being unapologetically my version of Blackness. So as I am outspoken when I do my protests that I lead, I don't allow respectability politics. So, I don't care that I have purple hair or I'm dressed in the way I choose. I also have aided and helped out at Cal Poly homeless protests you were talking about, and I'm all around. I help out with Black Humboldt when I can, and they help me out, and vice versa. Definitely, I'm also pushing the discourse about Afro-Mexican and Afro-Latina play and representation. So, yeah, that's me. Thank you.
So after watching this film, I thought of a couple of questions. And the first question that comes to mind is, as Black women, who gets to tell our story? And how is our story told? We're in the middle of Women's History Month. We're coming off of the heels of Black History Month. And just last week or week before last, Dr. Melina Abdullah, a Pan-African Studies professor at Cal State LA and also Black Lives Matter Los Angeles co-founder, spoke at Cal Poly Humboldt, and she spoke about Harriet Tubman. And one of the things that she said as a professor, as a historian herself, was that history books tell us that Harriet freed at least 300 people, according to history books, but it was more closely 1,000 people. So we heard in this film, initially they're saying 70 people and then 800 people. So it makes me wonder, who gets to tell our story? So I see you nodding the most. So Florence, would you like to speak?
In regards to Harriet, I think that it's wonderful that we have a chance to think of Harriet, and I'm sure that a lot of us have run by her story and heard her story. However, when it comes to, when we think about storytelling, it is important to think about all the things outside of what we're hearing. So when we're breaking down racism, when we're breaking down our own expectations of things, we need to look at what those stories are we're hearing and challenge them, because we can do the research. So Harriet's story is still being told, and hopefully, and one of the things I brought out from the film, it wasn't highlighted, but is that she was seen as a beautiful woman. In the description of her leaving, they said Minty, a good-looking woman, right? So this is a beautiful woman, but we only use one picture of her at her most aged self, strong, beautiful, still Black queen. But to see her as beautiful, that's not part of her story. But it is who she was. And so there's just so many aspects of Harriet that we don't get to see. And storytelling today, that's really what connects us. And there's actually a neuroscience who is doing science about storytelling and how it changes who we are in the active mind when you're telling the story, how you can be how it changes who you are physically. So our stories impact each other. And so it is very important to tell your own story. And there are so many vehicles today that we can do that better.
Tell me a bit about your upbringing, your background, how it relates to Harriet Tubman, your knowledge of Harriet Tubman, since, we're talking about millennials here, and, a lot of history gets lost because it's not told or retold or told properly. So tell me about your background and knowledge of Harriet.
My name is Ina. I am an Ethiopian immigrant. I was born in Ethiopia. I was adopted about at 3. My parents are Caucasian, and their whole family is, and they adopted me and my 3 siblings who are also Ethiopian. So the great thing about my parents is that they were both very, from the outside looking in, a lot of people have, different views about what it is to be an adoptive parent raising a child that is not of your race. And so that was something they considered and looked at, but instead of like discounting it completely, they tried their best to educate themselves as much as possible, whether it was from books or from knowing people who were of my race, were of my ethnicity, and looking at it and kind of knowing every aspect of what it is, what it would be to not only raise Black children, but also try to look in our minds of what it would be to be a Black child and in America these days. And obviously, being from a majority of people of your own ethnicity, you come in here, you come into America and you're 3 years old, you've never seen this many different types of people, and we were just like blown away as children. And so we didn't speak any English. We were totally like, it was just totally new. And so everything that we were taught was kind of was not just by experience, but by history. My parents were very, they both had degrees in college. They were both psychologists. They kind of tried their absolute best to learn as much as they could to educate us. And instead of putting us in a public school right early on, I went through homeschooling until I was a high schooler. And so my mom, who, if any, I know you guys don't know her at all, but she is a very she loves reading. And so she tried to instill that with me, and we read very early. So we read books on books on books from when we learned how to read. And one of those things is not only being the powers that you have as a homeschool mom is controlling and influencing on the books that you give to your child to read. And so she would try to find, when we're talking about certain things, right, slavery or brutality or different things that you go on in wars, try to get it from people that went through that situation instead of, the historians that can be very frustrating because they didn't go through that situation. And so that was something that we always thought of. And, with me, it was kind of like, oh, you also learn about the history of the people living in this country, but also the ones of your own birth country too, because we didn't want to lose that. And kind of coming here, it was kind of like, okay, Harriet Tubman was someone I learned very early on. She was very someone I liked to read about as much. And so kind of things that I learned about her was just someone that was very strong, someone that was very resilient and didn't let anyone really tell her what to believe or what to do, even being a woman, being a Black woman, being a former slave. There was a lot of things holding her back, and maybe things that would be considered baggage, but she just used her, the hard things that she went through to make her even stronger. And that was something that I feel like everyone can take into account and use, especially as being activists, being people that live in your everyday life, as being a Black woman as well. You learn things like, no one looks at me and thinks, oh, you're Ethiopian, you're an immigrant, unless they look to my features and like, oh, you look different, they're like, oh, she's just, she's Black. And I'm like, okay. But, and so like, but you get treated the same. You get treated like a Black American, even though, the history of Ethiopia is very different when it comes to other nations in Africa, and that's something that people don't get taught a lot. And even in history books, when you're learning about world history, you don't get told as much that Ethiopia was the one country that did not get colonized when all the rest of Africa was colonized. And that's something that Ethiopians are very proud of, which is why they're very secluded. And so it's just sharing that the history and how to bond and kind of empower people that live here is that there is a nation that was very fought, like generation to generation, to not be colonized. And to, I think, with talking about different things, working on campus is connecting people that feel so like lost, here they're just like, okay, like we feel Black on top of everything else because we're such a minority of us here. And looking around and you're just like, oh, what is going on? And you have to build such a tight-knit family with people that you've never met, because they share those relatability things that you're gonna go through here and you're going to go through life. And just trying to connect them to what a lot of immigrants tend to call, we all have a homeland, we also have our motherland, And so try to connect them would be like, you are absolutely gorgeous, like just thinking about different things, trying to learn about your history, but transform it into something that you use as just as a teaching tool, but also to empower people, not just make them feel so, like, I don't know what the word is for it, like just feel so alone and just feel like weaker, Like, so that's something that I really try to connect people with, is that you are above everything else. You are Black, but you are African. That's something that very isn't told to a lot of, Black kids even. Like today, they think, oh, our generations past, we don't know what country we came from. We don't know the mixture of what we are. There's 23andMe, but we're not gonna take that right now, and just be like, no, but you are Black, but don't forget where your ancestors, where they were taken from. Because that's something that that was how, I think that's the bigger thing is, yes, this is no longer, slavery was abolished, but you're seeing effects from it. Years and years later, decades, centuries, it's gonna be a thing until we connect and make that, bond across the ocean and just be like, we're still here, like we might not know everything, the dances, the culture, but we're still here. And I think that's something that talking to a lot of kids and students in Umoja, where I work on campus, is we feel so disconnected, so that's something that I try to help with. And I think Harriet Tubman, she was very just herself. That's something that I love reading about her. She doesn't look like she's trying to be anybody else or care about what anybody else is or anything like that. It's just being authentically yourself. And for me, that means not forgetting where my heart is, and my heart will always, part of me will always be in Ethiopia, being African, being Black, So it'll always be part of me. And so just finding your different identities and what it means to be you. And for me, I am a very beautiful Ethiopian Black woman, so we're good.
Listening to Ina talk, it made me realize we all are Black women, but we all come from vastly different backgrounds. You being Ethiopian American, raised by white parents. Florence, you're biracial, raised by a white mother. Mo, you have a Haitian background, being raised in the East Coast, and I'm assuming that
And she also has.
Yeah,
She's also biracial.
Oh, yes. Thank you. And Nikki, you are Mexican and Black?
Yeah, my dad's Hispanic and my mom's Black.
So, and I'm just Southern Negro myself.
Black and I'm proud. You hear that?
Yes.
That distinction is in our culture, but where did it come from? Where was that rooted from? That's something that probably, I was born 10 years after loving. The decision on loving. And my parents risked everything to be together. Their families didn't want them to be. In fact, my mother's father told her who his grandfather headed up the Ku Klux Klan in Oregon. And her father said, if you marry a black man, you will always be poor. And she was, because she believed that story. So we're talking about stories here. My grandmother is a queen, a strong, beautiful black queen, 6'5". She was a model. She was in my life throughout my childhood, and she helped raise me as well. I was raised as a black woman in a very segregated community where my mother, when she heard her history, she brought all of her children and raised them in a black community in segregated Oregon, Portland. So although you can see that there are advancements in Portland, it's very segregated there. And so races did not mix. And that's part of my story, but it's not who I am. I am more than my culture, my makeup. When I look up my background, I did do 23andMe. And in my background, I am mostly Nigerian. But you wouldn't see that by looking at me. In fact, my sister, who we have different fathers, she laughed and she said, "You are more black than I am." But she looks more black than I do. So to her, to the outside world, people would know that she's black. So you look at Mo and I, and maybe perhaps, you could tell that Mo is black. So she has less of that stigma that I do. But I walk into a room and I want my blackness to be seen and shown. And because I'm proud of being a black woman, I'm proud of being Walla Walla Native American. I'm proud of all of those things, but that's not who I am. Who I am are the actions in which I do. And I stand up for kids and youth in our community on a daily basis. And I am proud of being a beautiful black woman, no matter what anyone else sees when they look at me.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Wait, I want to jump in after
yes.
Flo. Because I want to talk about this idea of anti-blackness. I am a biracial child as well. My father is a Haitian immigrant. And so I was raised with a Caribbean community. Most people are from out of the country. And I didn't know I was black until I went to college. Because in my head, I always thought being black meant you are a Southern descendant or you are a descendant from someone who was enslaved, because I hadn't been taught yet that everyone in the Caribbean also came from Africa, right? And my father would always tell me, we're not black, we're West Indian, And so, you laugh, but that's a dividing factor for black communities growing up, And also being biracial, a lot of the times folks would say, well, you too white for the white kids and you're too black for the black kids, so find where you fit in, right? And it took a long time to realize that under the blanket, we're all black, because when you see me, when my fro's out, when I'm just living my best life, folks see me as a black woman. Sometimes people will tell me I'm Latine, people try to tell me what I am all the time. Ethnically speaking, yes, me and a Latine person could probably do 23andMe, and a lot of the same cultures will pop up, right? Some white, French, Irish, colonized, and then also African and Taino, native indigenous folks of the Caribbean. And so I think it just speaks a lot to how much we're raised in this anti-black rhetoric, so much so that my father didn't want me to leave the house telling people I was black, even though racially speaking, I'm a black woman. And today, I present to you right now as a black woman. And so just another thing to speak to, like what we're taught and what stories we're told and how long it took me to dig through history books to even know that the Caribbean was one of the main places that, slaves came from Africa. They went to the Caribbean and then they were sold off into South America, into North America. But the Caribbean was the hub that we were bringing black folks to, break them down and take away their humanity before we shipped them and sold them into the Americas. And that was like a history that I had to dig for while the black people in my family were telling me that's not our story.
That goes back to who gets to tell our story, and is the story accurate? Like I said, kind of tongue in cheek, I take pride in the word Negro, so I use it all the time. But I was a late in life baby. So my mother was born in 1928. My father was born in He always said the year of the Titanic. I think that was 1912. But if you look at those numbers, for a person my age, I am 2 generations outside of slavery. That shouldn't be the case. You know, my grandmother was born in 1897. Her parents had to have been slaves from Mississippi and Louisiana. So I know, the impact of slavery on my family. And I know that Florence and I were joking, no, Mo and I were joking earlier about the light-skinned Black folks. And what I have come to know, the lighter Black folks in my family are more outspoken, more militant, and the darker-skinned Black folks were more meek. So I had parents who weren't part of the civil rights movement. I had neighbors across the street who were freedom fighters and were arrested. I had siblings and cousins who were more militant, more leading to the path of Black Panthers. But my parents kind of held me into that, just play nice and be quiet and fly under the radar, and everything is gonna be all right. That doesn't work well. So I became more outspoken here, and I gained my voice here. But why don't, I haven't heard from you yet, Nikki. Tell me what inspired you to have a greater activist voice? What pulled your strength out for your path in activism?
Well, basically, it was already something that was brewing in me, but once George Floyd happened in 2020, it was like my breaking point. And I remember seeing the first protests out here in Eureka.
Speak up, Nikki.
Sorry. There was a protest in Eureka that went completely left, that was not conducted in the way that I felt was needed, especially in regards to protecting BIPOC and especially Black people. I walked away with the conclusion that that protest, I read it off as white anarchy because it was a lot of white people that attended, not with the care and support of Black people, but for themselves to attend, to have a great time bashing things, and not really being considerate of people's safety. So in the moment of not just the radicalization of us being acknowledged of what we've been going through, but also seeing people that state to be allies or want to do good things go about things wrong. So it made me step up, and it made me put myself out there to the point where I was, leading a protest in McKinleyville, which I didn't really know the severity of that at the time because I was only living here for about 4 months. So I didn't really get how big of a deal that was. I just felt discriminated, and I was like, no, I'm not about to take that, and I'm about to do something, and I'm not about to wait for nobody else to hold my hand or guide me. It was what it is. And that was my launching pad into being an outspoken activist. I will definitely say what was the one moment that pivotally shifted me politically into that was Dear White People. That was really, really, that was 2017 when I saw that, and that definitely forever changed me. So I would say that put me on the path into activism. So, and it took a very critical moment in our movement, sadly lives lost, but it nonetheless did spark the needed drive that I think we also are trying to maintain, because as someone that has been doing this work, and I know else, we're well aware that we're still trying to reach that height we had in 2020, that attention span that did not last that long. It was, it was a short burst of caring. So, but yeah, not to go on a tangent, but yeah, definitely that was my radical moment.
So I look at Harriet Tubman as being someone, I'm 5'1", so she was an inch shorter than me. Sometimes I question my own strength, but things that you're passionate about will pull the strength out of you, strength that you often didn't know existed. So what traits of Harriet are in each of you. So I'll start with you, Mo, and if you can answer the question, each of you, as we go down the line.
Yeah, let's see. I mean, doing it yourself, I think. That's not a description word, but I think, that aligns well with kind of the work that I do, and perseverance, because when you belong to a marginalized group that you put so much time and effort into taking care of, you often forget about yourself, right? And oftentimes Black folks have to make change for themselves because no one else is doing it for us. And so, I be tired, quite frankly. I be run down. Sometimes I'm like, forget these people. I don't want to do nothing for them no more. And then something else happens, and it's like I have amazing community connections, and it refuels the fire, throws wood back on the fire. But oftentimes I have to remind myself that although we shouldn't be the ones doing this work, we have to be doing this work. And as a mother also, it's like, I want a better tomorrow for my kids, right? I want a better tomorrow for Flo's kids and all the littles that are a part of our community. So the perseverance and do-it-yourself attitude is how I'll relate to Mama Harriet.
Yeah.
So Minty, we'll call her by her original name, right? So it's nice to learn more about Harriet. Some things that really I feel like I aligned with part of her is really her transcendent thinking. She wasn't of this time, of her time. She wasn't of her era. She knew there was something bigger, a better place that she was working towards. And she had to vision cast so that other people could get to that place. She wasn't going to sit where she was, even though even her own siblings drug her back the first time that she tried to escape. They drug her back. She had to escape the next few days on her own. So her transcendent thinking, I also think she was a pioneer of her own purpose. She was she was not one thing. You could not just say she's an abolitionist. You could not say she was just a general who's freed over nearly 800 people. You couldn't just say one thing encapsulated who she was. She was so much bigger. And so her story is fascinating, trying to get to know more of who she is. I'm grateful for this opportunity because I would just like to know from you all, how many of you got to learn about Harriet as children? By a sign of hand. Not a lot of our kids are getting the opportunity to learn about strong people in their community that they can look up to. And so right now, that's what our education is being attacked for our children. Not only mental health, but also the idea of whom you are, and the history of America needs to be told, right? So that we can transcend that together.
Accurately.
So, yes, the history, our history.
Yes, yes.
For the traits, I think something that I've always carried as a child is being very stubborn. And I know that could be viewed very negatively as a child, but something that my mom was like, you're so aggravating, but this is a good thing. You could just use it in a very, you're very stubborn, but when you use it for a good purpose and be very persistent, then it's like, okay, you can have when you decide your head on something, and if it's the right thing for you and the right thing for others too, then you be the person that will take it, to the level it needs to go for it to be successful. And that's something that she said that was something that, as a child, as having to parent a very stubborn child, it can be very annoying, but it was also something that she was very proud of, and being, and also I think a lot of, when you have that stubbornness, it also helps you become you survive a lot, because just the stubbornness to live, the stubbornness to keep going, even when you're told, you're not good enough, or you're not doing what you need to do, or you just need to be whatever they want you to be. You're very stubborn. to be better or be more than go outside the box, you know? And so that's something that my mom said, you were a survivor since you were a baby. I mean, you were in Ethiopia, you were a child that lost her family and had to go be in an orphanage and then survived the sicknesses of being in a place where there's not a lot of doctors or things like that, and they don't have, you know, the education on what diseases are and things like that, and they just have, you know, especially diseases brought from different places. You know, you have the herbs and stuff, but what if you don't have the parents to take care of you? And then, you know, being a child, so she was just like, you just always had the survival instinct where you just would not die, ever. Like, you could not do, that was not something you were ever gonna do. She was just like, I feel like that would be something you could do. And then when something that I took to, you know, becoming a college student, and it was just like, okay, you know, like, we're here, we're stubbornness to get through all of the obstacles of going through high school and becoming here and dealing with, you know, all the situations that you see around our country and having, you know, your own mental health struggles. And it was just something that you keep being persistent to keep going and not forget about your own future, you know, and how you want to live as an adult and affect, you know, other people. And I think she was stubborn, she was a survivor, and she was also very observant as well. I think that's something that she had to do, you know, to succeed and to be observant of everything around her, not just when she's saving people and bringing them out of slavery, but also just, you know, fighting in war, something that, you know, is just being observant and, you know, like paying attention to your surroundings and kind of observing how people act and how people think and being very curious about things too. So that's for me.
Nikki?
So I will say her willpower is something that I also embody in myself. It takes a lot of willpower to do what she did, and I feel there's a lot of my own within my life of, if without willpower, I probably wouldn't have gotten as far as I've had. I also can say her assertiveness, you know, to stick up, stand up, and not wait for anyone. She went and did this herself, and I have also parallels of, you know, with my own assertive moments in my life, and just the fact that, I will take the first step. I'm not afraid to, you know, make a mistake or fall, but like go for it, and just really just go in with the fact of when you're assertive in certain situations, like it's needed, and especially what she went through, obviously. But I would say, going back to current day, like for example, I would say me doing the protest at McKinleyville was a very assertive, it took a lot of willpower and wanting to stand up. And so that assertiveness, I was like, I don't care, I'm gonna go for it. So obviously those are two traits that I have that are parallel to her, but thank you.
So let's talk about a Black woman's strength for a moment. Let's focus on Harriet's strength. When she was 6 years old, she had an object thrown at her head and it fractured her skull. She suffered earthquakes, geez. She suffered headaches.
Trauma.
Yeah, that was my trauma. I had a flashback for a moment. I'm still healing from that. But she suffered headaches most of her life. She went back to retrieve her husband, the love of her life, and found out that he moved on with his life and forgot about her and started a new family. She had heartbreak, but she married a young man that was about, she became a sugar mama. She married a man quite young, much younger than her, and that helped her healing. But think about all of the pressures. Now, I'm sure you can agree, being a Black woman in America is tough. It's life-threatening. It's exhausting. What did you say, Mo? I'd be tired.
I'd be tired.
Not even tired, tired. I'd be tired a lot. And I mean, it's the truth. As Black women, we face so many obstacles in the home, in the workplace, in society. We are praised for our strength. We are ostracized for our strength. We are belittled for our strength. People attempt to weaken us about our strength. And all I can think is a phrase that we have heard over the last couple of years, especially since our government has relied on Black women to take us out of the hell that we've been in. And all I can say is protect Black women at all costs. Because right now it seems like we're the ones doing all the saving. But guess what? We need to be saved ourselves sometimes. So protect Black women. And like I said, I will add to that again, at all cost. So,
And queer Black folks too.
yes. So I see there is a question in the back.
I'm hoping that I'd like to tell you just a tiny story and then ask a question of the panel. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
And it's dealing with strength. Okay. 3 years ago, I went to Tanzania, and I volunteered in a very, very, very tiny village, about 3 hours from any, quote, larger towns. And there were about five Caucasian women and about 1,000 Africans, and I interacted for 3 weeks. It was the most amazing experience of my life. I felt absolutely no sense of strangeness in that community. We were accepted and loved beautifully. At the very end of my volunteer experience, I was asked my friend and I were asked to talk to 5 beautiful African women who had been educated in the college level about something that we had taught in this 3 weeks. And I thought, they know more than I do. So I asked them, what would you like to know? The first thing they wanted to know was, what was America like? I said, what do you know? She said, we know quite a bit because we watched the Kardashians. I said, ooh. She said, I don't know if America's quite like the show of the Kardashians. And I said, what else do you know? And she said, this gal said, I know that everybody has a gun. All Americans have guns. I said, perhaps not. There's a lot of guns, but they're owned by some people, but not a lot of other people. And this wonderful gal said, I want to come to America. And they all 5 women agreed, I really want to come to America. So my question to you is, what was my responsibility to encourage these beautiful, well-educated young women to come to America who had, I think, no concept at all of prejudice? What was my obligation to them to say, come, please, but be aware that you might find that you're uncomfortable some places. Should I have done that? Because I did. And how do you explain prejudice to someone who probably has never experienced prejudice?
Yeah, I'll jump in and say that I wouldn't tell people you'll be uncomfortable sometimes. I would tell people that there is violence that happens here against Black bodies, and to keep it 100, right? Because sometimes I'm uncomfortable, but I find myself in unsafe situations more often than merely uncomfortable. Even when we watched that film, it's like we've internalized trauma for Black folks. The whole audience went, oh, when we found out that Harriet's husband left her, but we had heard much worse stories in that whole documentary, and not one person reacted to some of the violent trauma that Harriet went through. But all of us felt the need to express some type of recognizing that, oh, heartbreak, oh, poor girl. And it's like, 10 minutes before that, we found out that she fractured her skull and had seizures and, was being whipped as a 6-year-old. So, I think it's a bigger issue than just, you might find yourself in some sticky situations when when we have normalized violence against Black bodies so
I
much
did go
so.
into more detail than that, but I wasn't sure if I should have or not.
I would tell them to stay home.
Yeah.
You laugh. No. I would tell them to stay home. I have never experienced Africa firsthand, but I've heard from so many people who have experienced Africa after living in racist, corrupt America for all of their lives. And they go to Africa, and for the first time in their lives, they don't have to do this. And they don't have to worry about who is out to get them, who is out to defame their name, who is out to physically harm them.
And I'll end too with saying that our country has an issue with anti-Blackness, but it also has a anti-immigrant issue as well. So to be a double whammy traveling to America, North America, is pretty dangerous.
I want to just add a perspective because, you know, I sit here with light skin privilege. So I walk through this world feeling like I was equal to, that I had advantages. Everyone thought that I was beautiful. I never had someone say you're ugly because you're Black or what. My daughter is 8 years old. She's beautiful. And her best friend tells her that she's the color of poop. That's here in Eureka. That's here today. When I gave my introduction, I said that I am a mother to Black queens and a Black man because I have to protect my family. Although white people, I'm okay when I walk in a room most times. My family is not. And I wear that and I carry that with me everywhere I go. So although I've had a different experience in my walk, I protect the people around me. And I would just add to that too, that Black Humboldt was a safe haven for me because when I came to Eureka or Humboldt County, I had never experienced my own Blackness like I do here. And at first I was so excited because, you know, I was like, wow, people know I'm Black. And I'm so proud because I'm a proud, internally I'm a proud Black woman, but when I enter spaces, oftentimes I'm not accepted as that. So I've gotten really used to that like having that callus around me, but I was finally accepted here. I was a Black woman because everyone saw me as Black. At first it felt really great, but then you realize why that is. And let that sit with us that we are behind here. We say 10 years, sometimes
20.
I say 20 often, but I'm more
Like, we
moving
a
towards.
smooth civil rights movement over here. That's what's happening in
I
Humboldt
say
County.
stuck in the 90s.
So I know I'm somewhat preaching to the choir because those of you that came here, you have an eagerness to learn and know more about Black people. And you don't have always the opportunity to have Black friends. So it's not normalized for you to live in a Black existence and around a beautiful Black people. Black people are criminalized, they are sexualized, and they are demonized. It's like when I think of The Wiz, how they had those masks on. I don't know if you've watched The Wiz, but they unzipped this body that they had, and they were beautiful Black kings and queens underneath all of that, because we have this callous over us, how others perceive us, not who we are. And that's why it goes back to what we were asked earlier about our stories. Each of you have a story, but you're in a community of people that you didn't drag here yet. And so not only Harriet Tubman, but they have the same documentary about Frederick Douglass. And there was concern that is that too forward thinking? Because is it too militant? No. We should know what Frederick Douglass has done. And we should talk about it. And if it makes us uncomfortable, good. Let's not pass that on to the next generation.
To answer the question, I think, to be honest, when speaking to other immigrant African women, it's kind of like this different, like I've been raised mostly here, so I'm like, oh, it's a thing, you're gonna have to get used to it. But then at the same time, we're like, oh no, but it shouldn't be this way. We shouldn't have to get used to it or anything. But it's something that I think I didn't know was as fully evident in my life until I had an altercation with the police when I was 13, and it was kind of like, oh, okay, like this is what it really is, and you have to be like, the fact that we are taught, this is how you talk as a Black person to a police officer, not just a person, but a Black person, and then also as a Black woman, what do you do? What do you, how do you speak? How do you, what do you prep beforehand, just so you can teach, the fact that you have to teach your kids, and like this is what you're gonna be treated like, and this is how you have to be extra careful, having to know that my little brother and my brothers as, Black male, they are seen as, as more dangerous, as more, it's just kind of as an object, but also the ones that carry the weight a lot more sometimes. But then also as Black women, you're turned into, oh, you're so strong, which means, oh, and then when you use your strength in words, you're too angry, like, it's like, oh, well, what do you want me to be, And just, there's a lot of hypocritical thinking, and you're being flip-flopped into different things. You can't be all that you want to be and please everybody, And it's just kind of something that we learn, every immigrant, all of us adopted kids, we tend to try to know other adopted kids as we move on through our lives, and it's kind of like, oh, this like, we're adopted too. I'm like, oh, so you've been Americanized, like it's just, and we tease each other about that, little things like, oh, you they put ranch on your chicken, you don't put spices, different things like that, and different things are like, oh yes, they did that to us, and just little things like that. But then you're also told you aren't seen as a beautiful human being. You are seen as literally the color of your skin. And I think a lot of Africans are kind of blown away when they come here. It's like, oh, like we're told, like we are beautifully our ethnicity. We are told storytelling is a big thing. Tell the story of your ancestors, pass it forward and pass it forward. Know who your last name being your father's first name, so you will always know things going backward and everything. And it's just sometimes I wish I was more educated when I came here, but I was little, so I didn't know. But talking to other kids, it's just like, yes, there's a lot of, hate and violence, and it's just very real. And that's why, like I said, you have to, like she said, you have to be very upfront and open with it, because it might affect how they, if they come here, and you want them to be, be aware as much as possible, where it's not like a big, surprise. They're like, oh, but it's painful. It is painful, but painful enough to tell someone. Yes, but it's also vital for them to know, because it might be painful for you to tell it, but it's also dangerous. Yes, you're going through it, and if you come here and you're like, oh, I didn't know it was like this, and you're like, I didn't know there was the police act this way, having from a country that the police are your own color. It's not even really police; they're military men that go around and make sure everything's okay, and they let you run it. Like the families run things, the neighborhoods, the villages. It's not really totally different, and that's why it's like I know they're like, oh, what is America? But you have to be honest. It's hard, because being American, you're being taught to be very proud of your country. Be very patriotic, but it's also being. With the history of this country, you have to be very honest, just to take responsibility, and it's like, maybe you didn't do anything, but, it's just like, okay, but this is how it is. It's just being straight up honest, truthful, but.
I would say you don't want to set them up for failure. So it is very privileged to go ask someone from an underprivileged country, or potentially, I don't know what the environment or what country it was exactly, but Tanzania, sorry. So pretty much, it's a privilege to go, because not anyone can just say, you can't just ask anyone, well, just go visit a country. I haven't visited Africa. I haven't visited, I haven't been out of, like, the furthest I've gone was Nevada. So, you know, ideally, before you want to move anywhere, you would want to check it out. Like, before I moved to Portland, I would want to visit Portland and get a feel for what that's like as a Black person. So I would say, not to necessarily like discourage them 100%, but not to only be candid, but have them put in the emphasis that they need to do their own research of what an environment would they ideally want to be around. Do they want to be somewhere like Atlanta, or where you're predominantly like Black folks from all different classes and positions and occupations? Or are they idealizing, you know, California, which is also, because I'm from SoCal, so it's a very, you know, it's illusion of what, except you said they were watching Kim Kardashian, the Kardashians, which is very ironic. We all here know why that's ironic for us, but, and we won't get into that context, because, you know, because mixed guesses, I would say. But definitely, it is probably unrealistic to ask underprivileged folks to go visit a country, but I would strongly suggest to really get a feel. They will need to get a feel and also do their own research and talk to Black Americans, talk to actual Black folks that live here, that are engaged, that could help them with where they're not led astray or misled or, you know, put in harm's way by, you know, you wanting to be sweet turns into someone's life at risk, and this is not really worth it, you know, because that's why I think of like impact over, what's the word? It's impact versus, I used to say this to white people all the time.
Intent.
Intent, there we go. Impact over intent. It's the impact of it all, over like what you intended doesn't matter when the end result is the impact to that individual. But yeah, that's pretty much what I would say.
Last thing that I would say, turn off the Kardashians, because that is a false sense of any reality.
Yeah, even like a white reality.
Yeah, but encourage them to watch Living Single, Abbott Elementary, I'd even Blackish, Grownish, A Different World. And I mean, those are programs, both past and present, that give a positive depiction of Black life. I'll even say The Cosby Show, because we all have our own feelings about Bill Cosby, but being a 54-year-old woman, seeing a positive, intact Black family of professionals with regular family problems and kids who miss curfew and drinking and dyslexia, that's all part of our makeup. But there are greater positive depictions of Black family, Black life outside of CNN, the Kardashians, Fox News, and yeah. We are a strong, powerful, beautiful, rich tapestry. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I see a hand in the audience.
I was raised here in Eureka. I went to Washington School over by Sequoia Park. And the first time I'd ever seen a Black person when I was in 5th grade. But there was no prejudice. We didn't have prejudice. We weren't raised that way. So it was just like he was a Black kid. And he came and played at my house. He came to play with my brother. And I went to his family, and I think I had, some food there. But there wasn't any prejudice then.
You didn't have any, but I bet your neighbors murmured while they were at your house.
So what was your question?
She didn't have a question.
I didn't have, I was just making a statement about
Okay,
being
what answer
young
question?
and
Do
Eureka.
you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. You know, everyone said they all went, oh, because you could relate to, and she went back and found her husband with another woman. But I'm curious is how much her traumatic brain injury affected her personality. Because I come from a medical background, and I've had friends who've had motorcycle accidents, brain injuries from that, strokes, et cetera, and it does affect their personalities. And so she ran away after the TBI. So I'm wondering how much did that affect her personality and her thought process about where she was at and what was happening to her life.
Yeah.
It could have been drive.
Yeah, I mean, she may have been like, I could die tomorrow. I refuse to die an enslaved person. You know, it could have, and I also think this is another example of things we never learned about Harriet Tubman.
I never knew that about her, so I was surprised, and I'm thinking nobody's speaking to that. But I'm sure it must have really affected her life.
No, when you think about neuroscience, sometimes there's an awakening. So we did talk about transcended thinking. Like she had an awakening, it seems. And I'm sure there's even more documentation that we should all dig in. I mean, that's what this little teaser, it's 30 minutes, right? About someone's story, and it's not even told from her point of view. So we need to dig deeper and know more, but I think, you know, sometimes those types of things also open up a whole, that happened when she was 13. So she lived with that, but she still was the same person who went out and talked her master into allowing her to go sell her own services to others so that she can, and she was still the person who went down to the shipyard and picked up heavy things like everybody else. She didn't look back and say, I'm coward, or I'm not strong enough, or I should be doing this, it's easier. She went and did the hard thing, and she refined her skill. She became a sword. Iron sharpens iron. She slid through and she carved away that women are still looking at today. Just a few weeks before they released this, Girl Trek honors Harriet Tubman's walk every year, and 10 Black women took that journey just for the experience of walking in her shoes, freeing themselves, because we all have to free ourselves of the information that we've been given that's incorrect. Right? There's still freedom that needs to be had today, and we still have to get it. So we have experiences, and then because of those experiences, we can offend each other, and there has to be these dialogues, these opportunities. We could talk about it. We can work things out. We can understand one another. We can build a community that's more collective, because what Black people truly are kind, loving, passionate, beautiful, amazing people, but yet that's not what we've been told. We're told to be fearful of them, right? That's what society says. That's what television tells us. That's what putting our history in the 2 paragraphs in our history book tells us. Sir?
Well, there were 2 important things that were in the film that I kind of wish maybe you guys would talk about. One is that although, first of all, I learned about Harriet Tubman as a child, but I learned about a tenth of what was in this film. One of the things that was in the film is that she was betrayed at one point by 2 Black men who were relatives. But that didn't stop her, didn't slow her down, she continued on. The other thing is that as I'd learned that she was an abolitionist and she was a conductor on the railroad, but one of the things that it was very obvious from this story is that she didn't put all of her coinage into the basket of working in the political. She was very direct. I mean, she went on the raid, she went to the 13 trips. So the thing that I'm seeing nowadays is that too many people turn to electoral politics and think that that's going to save anybody, and it's not saving anybody in America. And I think there needs to be more direct action like Harriet Tubman. And also don't just assume that because a person is Black in political office that they are therefore your friend.
Well, there were over 100,000 slaves that got their own freedom, and they went to Canada. That number can be be verified because they went to Canada. They're part of the Canadian community now. So it wasn't just, she did this work only 8 years of her life. There are so many more aspects of who she is as a person and what she was about. But this is the glimpse that we get of her story. So we're talking about those stories, and it would be great to hear the story from her own lips, right?
And I will say too, some of the strongest or most influential Black movements came from backyard organizers, right? Like the Black Panther Party, Black Lives Matter. Those were a bunch of Black folks that were like, the system's not working in our favor. We can't use these channels to reach our goals. And that's, grassroots Black organizing has been some of the most impactful movements in recent history, right?
I think Harriet was also the first to remember all skin folk ain't kinfolk.
Yeah, you quick to pull a gun on somebody. They're like, you're gonna turn around, you're gonna get shot.
Can't reveal the path.
You can't save everyone, and some people might not even know they need to be saved or free. So, there are a couple of phrases.
Can I pause on that one for a minute? Because I know we say that a lot about, everyone that was in slavery wanted to be free. Now, did they want to risk their life so that they could get freedom? There was not one person that was enslaved that said, yes, I'd rather be enslaved, thank you. There's not one person. So we just have to remove that from our minds and our thoughts, and anything that has told us that Black people were happy slaves, that's got to be taken out. That should not be uttered again. I have freedom, but I don't have full freedom yet, right? When I walk somewhere, when I do something, there's things that keep me from. A lot of it has to do with classism, I know, today. But we all have an onus to break the chains that are binding us from that freedom.
It was said in the film, in the early moments in the film, freedom should be universal. But is it? On so many levels, it isn't universal. Medical care, home ownership, education. Those are all things that are connected to freedom, and all things that are that should be universal, but they're not. And it keeps us in this state of enslavement in this country. Not in this country, in this world. So, I see a hand there.
Yeah. One of the ladies talked about freedom that I didn't really heard this before from me, but years ago we lived in Oakland. I was still studying to be a lawyer, which I don't like to tell people because I hate lawyers. But I worked as a truck driver, and every day out of Richmond, we hauled stuff over to across the Richmond Bridge there. And one of the guys I worked with, he was a white guy, just a guy, truck driver. And one day we were talking about prejudice and stuff from some of the guys and some of the other truck drivers. And he told me a very fascinating thing. He said, Ken, I went to San Quentin himself because he held up a liquor store when he was young. He was from Oakland or somewhere down there. But he said, I never was free till I got to San Quentin and learned to not dislike Black people. I was a prisoner of what I grew up with. He said, it's, you don't understand till you see it. He said, so many people that I know that think they're free, they're victims of their own prejudice, and they're prisoners of their own prejudice. And he said, when I was in San Quentin, I had to get along and live with Black people. A lot of the convicts are inmates were Black people. He said, and I'd never mixed with the Black people. It was Oakland, a lot of Black people, but he was a white guy, you know what I mean? And he said, that's the biggest gift I got. I got over my childhood, younger things of drinking and carousing, and he paid for his crime, and I always remembered that he was never free till he got over his prejudice. And then he was free.
Well, there's something I want to chime in on that. So this is like a discourse I've recently was being heard about, but there's like a lot of white people where like black people to them are a concept, but once you move into like a bigger city or whatnot, we're not a concept anymore. You know, it's an everyday, you see us, work, whatnot, everyday lives. So there's that that moment for a person that comes from being, where they're only given concepts until they start to not just like the humanizing part, but it's also they have to reflect on themselves that that maybe also they're not too far off from, you know, whoever planted those seeds, their racist uncles, aunts, etc. But it's a journey that they're gonna have to take to not just not be racist, but like Angela Davis says, to be anti-racist. So I'll end off on that.
Anti-racist.
Yeah.
Should be all. If you've seen South Pacific, there's a song in South Pacific called "You've Got to Be Taught to Be Afraid." You know, people whose eyes are ugly made, or people whose skin is a different shade. You have to be careful you're taught. That song was in the musical, and when they tried to take that musical South Pacific to 7 states, the composers were told, "We'd be glad to have you show that, but you need to take that song out of the show." And they said, "No way." The whole point of this show, partly, is because of racism, and we will not take that song out. And that was in the 50s. Look that song up. You've got to be taught. That's what it's called.
Well, let's look at 2023. Our so many rights are in jeopardy right now. The attack on women's bodies, the attack on the family, the voting, all of these things. And you know, I look at the Supreme Court and wonder what our world is going to be like. I told a friend yesterday, I said, I can expect in my lifetime, I learned the history when it was illegal for interracial marriage, and I am predicting that I will see it become illegal again in my lifetime. And it's crazy that we are in this place. But what's a racist person's biggest fear? And this is what I said, a racist white man's biggest fear is that his daughter will marry a black man or a woman.
I would like to add on to that. Well, maybe that's what you feel. I feel the racist's biggest fear is themselves. They realize that once they don't have race, they can't put above us. They're stuck with just themselves. And I got this from Toni Morrison. This is from one of her interviews. So yeah, so you know what I'm trying to reference. So yeah.
They have to feel that they're better than.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because then they're stuck with just themselves and their own achievements. If they have any in their, then it becomes, now it's, you know, who's the most required, who's the most qualified, and usually they're not the case when it comes to, when you put so much your eggs or just your, when it comes to races, like that's what keeps them ahead. That's what, you know, this unbalanced, like them having a head start and so on, everything fixed for them. When they don't have that, then if they're mediocre, they're just mediocre.
I think there's a lot of fears. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I have a question. I think we're getting close to the end. My son had a traumatic brain injury 30 years ago. He watches a lot of TV. And I watch TV with him, and sometimes I watch it, and sometimes I read. But I happen to like commercials. And they're evolving. And one of the things I've noticed is that, especially I think since George Floyd, that definitely the racial diversity is being showcased in commercials. And there's lots of multiracial families. There's like, there's one of them with a little girl with big hair and their white daddy. And I don't know, there's just these little shots. And the other thing that is really being shown on TV is acceptance of gay, LGBT, bi, two-spirit, all kinds of people. And including in commercials where men kiss. And I wonder if you think we can, I mean, that's changing something at a deep level. I didn't see a black person in my home till I was 16 years old. I had already been involved in politics. When I started going to San Francisco by myself, I lived by the airport on the bus and then hitchhiking later. My father said you can go anywhere you want except don't go to, I'm old now and I forget names.
Hunter's Point.
No, he did say Hunter's Point, but that was really out of my way. But to go to one of my friends' house, I had to go on Fillmore Street. And I rode the bus on Fillmore Street on Sunday mornings, and there are these gorgeous people with these gorgeous women with gorgeous clothes, and I love them. So then I started going there, forget my friend, and got involved with the tutoring, and there was a community center in Fillmore and Geary. Anyway, but I still didn't see a black person in my house until I was 16. And that, I don't know. I don't think that happened. I'm just curious. The question is, what do you guys think the effect of these commercials where people sit and watch TV, do you think it's having an effect?
Yeah. I mean, media literacy is so important, especially if you have a single parent household or you're, stuck in front of the TV. Maybe you don't connect, you don't have a lot of friends or something, and I do think that it makes an impact. I see differences in just the way my children talk about what's deemed as like a norm or a societal norm, because there are people that look like them on TV, or there are family makeups that look like our family makeup on TV. And I even find myself saying, like, oh, look at this commercial, and my son will go, what? What about it? And so media propaganda was how we shaped our whole country in the 40s, 50s, and
kids notice the very pro-gay. There's particularly some HIV meds which can keep it non-transmissible. Those things. Yeah. I wasn't 16 when I first saw it. I was older than that. And I was running all over San Francisco. It was until Castro Street happened, which was after the.
Yeah, I mean, we're a queer household, so my kids don't think twice about any of those commercials, yeah.
But so your view of a commercial, you may see the positivity in it. I may see the pandering in it. So there are frequent depictions of families in commercials.
They're never all black.
Yeah, you'll see a biracial family with a black dad and a white mom, and then you'll see a picture of, or an image of a black woman with a child. Where's daddy? So it looks really diverse and really like, oh, this is inclusive, but it's playing to the trope of the single black woman yet again. And that happens all of the time. It's the lens in which you view. There is a comment that came up during a discussion about race years ago in McKinleyville that I attended. And this innocent guy said, well, I asked all of my friends if there were racists in McKinleyville, and they all said no. And I asked, well, who did you ask? And, I asked my friends, and I used the analogy, I'm not going to ask a skateboarder if he sees sharks when he scuba dives. He'll say no, because he's on land. He's not on sea. So you're asking the wrong person. Ask people who may be subjected to the racism. If they experience it, you're gonna get a different.
What I was asking is what you guys thought, and I seem to see, I think I might see black women and white men a lot. And white men and little.
I've rarely seen a whole dark-skinned black family in any media.
Yeah.
It's almost always light-skinned black folk. It's almost always interracial. It's very rare that you will, except for Family Matters. But
it's a very Kenya's Barris type of, light-skinned black woman, dark-skinned black man, somehow mixed kids.
Racially ambiguous children.
We pick up our implicit bias that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
light is better, dark is bad.
Television, and thank you, Keet, for making this opportunity and looking for funding so that we can enrich our community and our experience. However, TV moves us forward 2 steps and back 3 steps. Like we're always, you don't ever, television isn't the way to get your education on culture, right? And books or experience, who knows? I would say a lot is hidden in music. And we have one of the, if you guys didn't know, one of 100 most prominent women in Humboldt County is Lorna Bryant. She's a mother to us all. She's that auntie. She's a person that helps pick us up and uplift our community in many ways. And I would follow Lorna wherever she went. So if she said this is going to be a good event, I would be here. However, it is that's what helps me to see us as a full people, is knowing our people, our aunties, our history, our ancestors, whose shoulders I stand on. But music, I would say, one of the things that uplifted the Black community the most was always in music. I'm sure that even we're talking about slavery, we're talking about the railroad, we're talking about, there was music that was being sung so that they would know when it was time to leave and which way to go and which star to follow. Nina Simone, one of my favorites, she uplifted the Black people during the time we needed music most when she talked about how beautiful it was to be Black. And Black is beautiful. There are so many other ways than television to grasp the culture, to move forward. And I would say Nipsey Hussle. If you don't know Nipsey Hussle, I go from Nina Simone to Nipsey Hussle, So, but there's a lot of great pioneers in music, even young music, poets. We have a lot of strong music.
Just the use of
musically,
hip-hop in general.
yes.
Hip-hop culture was...
Even AJ here and his brother, what's his name?
Ra.
There's some local talents. There's storytellers through music, and that's a really great insight of how the real, true, beautiful Black people are.
You talk about music. I am a DJ, and that is, music is a unifier. Music is a healer. Music does so much. DJ D-Nice, a rapper starting with the origins of Boogie Down Productions with KRS-One and Scott LaRock, who healed us during the pandemic with Club Quarantine. This man has gone from just being, you say my name is D-Nice. I grew up listening to D-Nice as a teenager, and he has gone on to be something greater than his humble beginnings, with Club Quarantine on Instagram, playing music to heal us when we were locked in our homes. I just heard him interviewed by Marlon Wayans of the 250 family member Wayans family. It's really about 10 of them. But Marlon Wayans was guest hosting The Daily Show, and he had D-Nice as his guest. And D-Nice said, I learned Black history through hip hop. I didn't learn it in the classroom in the Bronx, New York, or I think the Bronx, New York, somewhere in New York City. He said, I learned it from Public Enemy, and I learned it from KRS-One. So that is the power of music. Florence, you talked about music was used for freedom. Follow the drinking gourd. It's talking about the Big Dipper and which direction to go to freedom. I mentioned that my grandmother was one generation outside of slavery, raised in Mississippi, and she lived with us growing up. And I remember her singing songs. And it wasn't until sitting in this very room as this documentary was being aired that I remembered a song. She would sing all the time, "Oh, come, let us go to the promised land." And it didn't hit me until this very moment what she was singing about. She wasn't talking about going back to Mississippi. She was talking about going to freedom. And that was a song she probably heard from her mother and father, singing about their own freedom. So it's a reminiscent song for her, but it was a livelihood and a yearning for her parents, my great-grandparents. So music is a powerful force, powerful, powerful force. There's still stories hidden in the music. And Peggy, I'm gonna reach out to you specifically. I'm gonna ask you in a month, after you've looked at commercials through a different lens, yeah.
Just Google 90s hip hop. It was all about storytelling. It was all about
The commercials.
I was like,
But that,
No, we've been watching. My son is 50 this year, and he grew up with hip hop, and he actually grew up as the white Chinese of the Richmond district. I mean, we never lived in a place that was like us, but hip hop, I couldn't understand what I loved about hip hop until I sat down and listened to the words, because it's really hard. It's hard to understand.
the KRS-Ones and the
KRS,
Scott
that's
LaRocks and they were the griots.
But they
were
also
the
write the
CNNs.
lyrics now, so you can listen along.
You could read them, yeah.
You can look up the lyrics.
Yeah.
KRS-One
lots
was a
of-
scholar.
Yes.
In high school, I learned so much information that was not available to me through my public textbooks through KRS-One.
I learned about him from Sublime, and so whenever that was 20 years ago, Sublime was something we could agree on, and then we reached out from there.
So
Yes, 1 month.
Yeah.
do you have a question?
I actually had one question. Sorry, hopefully this might be the last one since I know people have to go places. But Ms. Flo, you mentioned Nina Simone, who is a prolific, wonderful musician and singer. What are your thoughts, and I'm just curious what the thoughts of the panelists are, in regards to the 2016 biopic of Nina that was played by Zoe Saldana, who is a light-skinned black woman.
With prosthetics.
Prosthetic
On her
nose.
face.
Should she have taken that role to tell the story of Nina, or should she have given it to someone else? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Not having seen that or been part of that, that piece, I would say that she shouldn't have played the role personally, just from where I sit, just because the magnificence of Nina was that she was a strong black woman in a time when it wasn't popular to be that. Now we are moving into another era where it is beautiful to be a black queen and they're on our pedestal. However, there was a time she had to uplift an entire community with her music, with her soul of sound, and it was magical what she could do with notes. There's a really a strong hand here. You want to add to that?
I just want to answer and comment slightly. As a dark-skinned black woman like Nina Simone, Zoe Saldana taking on that role, because this was a conversation that I had with friends and with family, with my husband, like around the time that it came out. And I remember being so angry because it was just like one of Nina Simone's biggest things. And there is a documentary about her on Netflix. Everyone should watch it. It's amazing. You will cry. Part of Nina Simone's thing was that her being dark-skinned and not being perceived as beautiful, because even within our own community, there is colorism amongst us. And so there is the light skin and the dark skin thing. And so having a light skinned woman play a dark skinned woman whose whole thing was just a huge slap in the face and disrespect to everything that she stood for. So that just like brought something up.
I would like to add, well, so I was on Twitter when that was all going down, so I heard the actual Black Twitter discourse. So, okay, so pretty much the consensus of Black Twitter is pretty much that Zoe, the type of role Zoe plays in general is like a niche of like, because from what my knowledge of is that Zoe, in a way, and I believe Zoe's Afro-Latina. She steps in and out of her Blackness when it's acceptable, depending on her role. And because of the privileges she has as a mixed race, racially ambiguous Black woman, it was a disservice because at first she stood on, she like doubled down. But as soon as George Floyd happened, she came out on video and apologized for that.
She has many times in public spaces denounced herself as a Black woman because she belongs to Latine heritage.
Yes.
And so to portray one of our strongest, iconic, dark-skinned Black women when you can't even say you're Black is, like our friend said, like a huge slap in the face. And like, when you are a person in a position of power, representing like marginalized people, how you choose to use that power is very impactful. And so, yeah.
Yeah, especially doing blackface. They literally put her in blackface,
like
literally. And yeah, so definitely what you said. But pretty much, yeah, it's just she's just known for that. From folks that, and I don't really watch movies, but I just know I didn't even watch this movie. But like I said, I was on Twitter.
I want to just take a moment just to wonder what society would create a beautiful she's a Black woman, I'm looking at her, she's beautiful, that would not want to own her Blackness. You know, that's the cancer, right?
The conditioning.
The conditioning that she had to go through, that she could not look at herself as a Black woman and say, I'm Black and I'm beautiful. You know, that is really the essence in what we're fighting for, is that we can look in the mirror and all say that we're beautiful queens, whoever we are. You know, we can own our own beauty. And yes, it is sacred. Nina is sacred in our community, so she should have been, you know, in this situation, honored with someone that could own their Blackness. And a dark-skinned, beautiful Black queen should have played her in this day and age.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Who can sing?
Boom. Boom.
It's like equivalent to when Zendaya almost played Aaliyah. Thankfully, she didn't. And yeah, which that movie flopped.
And when you think about it, it's kind of like, yeah, when you look at it, there's different like perspectives on what a Black woman is. But I think just thinking about it, like just thinking about what you asked, I was kind of like, you know, like from my perspective, I was like, that would be like if anyone that wasn't African played an iconic African figure. Like that would have been something we would all been like, what? Like, but also it just shows how evident it is still today. Like even just in being an actress, how the standards of what beauty is, the lighter your color is, also affects what work jobs you get, you know, what opportunities you get as a woman. And that kind of digs down where maybe a woman, it doesn't matter where you are. It happens in all, you know, different cultures. The lighter your skin is, the more opportunities you get. And it's kind of like, okay, when you think about it, it's a person of darker skin has to work twice as hard to be seen as, even if they are twice as talented, 10 times as talented, it's kind of like, okay, it's a slap in the face for them. Actresses who are kind of like, why I am a great actress, I own my Blackness, but because my skin is not dark or isn't light enough, I cannot play this role. And that's why no one's denouncing her, you know, saying she isn't Black when we say she shouldn't have played that role. It was just kind of like
it's not for you.
Yeah, it's not your place in the moment, and it's no disrespect to her, but in that place and time, it was a disrespect to other people. You know, the action. So
she didn't stay in her lane. She didn't stay in her light skin lane.
Sometimes you have to.
She's like $1 million paid actress. Like she
Yeah.
did not need to take that role.
Yeah.
You might also want to listen to Billie Holiday, who's saying this iconic song called
Strange Fruit.
That's someone to study also.
So
the bravery that she displayed and her determination to go ahead and sing that song.
And her story to start.
Told her she would be murdered if she sang that song.
So that goes back to the power of music again, and I'm gonna give you a little homework and make the connection between Harriet Tubman and modern policing as we know it now. because modern policing stems from slave catchers. So keep that in mind, and I'm going to give you homework. Go Google KRS-One, Sound of Da, D-A, police. And the lyrics begin, whoop, whoop, that's the sound of the police, whoop, whoop.
That's the sound of the police.
And it's an amazing song. It teaches history. He says, officer, 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 overseer. Who are overseers? The police. So get a little history, KRS-One history, and think about that as you're listening to that song. And there's a video, so watch the video.
The Googles are a great resource.
So Blackish had a song during Black History Month because he was bombarded with all of the questions from his white friends. And I'm gonna sing it. What a friend we have in Google. All your questions answered there. What a privilege to ask them instead of asking your Black friend. So I'm not a singer, but I recommend Google quite a bit. So
But you know what? Sometimes
There's
it's hard
misinformation.
for me
Yeah.
to ask the Black people things.
You shouldn't.
And
If that's not your
because
friend.
I'm so friggin' afraid of making a mistake.
And I'll give you the advice right now. If you do not have an interpersonal relationship with a Black person, do not ask them anything.
Yeah.
Unless it's, where did you park your car? What would you like for lunch? You should not be asking people you don't have genuine, close relationships with any racial questions.
Like, how did you get your hair like that? Can I touch it?
What Mo is basically trying to say is
So
that
what I do is I ask my white friend who's married to a Black person. You know, that's where I
More
get most of my
interpersonal.
Yes,
Yes.
interpersonal relationship is
Yeah.
the key
Yeah.
to these tough questions,
Yeah.
okay?
because the foundation of that is that we don't want to give our labor, we're not going to just expect labor from random Black folks. It's
No,
just
I get
it's very, yeah, so that's
And-
essentially what we're saying.
And as Mo said, and I reiterate, I'd be tired.
Yeah,
And it's not your job to educate me.
Yeah, and
unless you pay us.
so it is a beautiful thing, like I said, to be a Black woman, but it's also painful, exhausting, dangerous. I'm not an angry Black woman.
I am.
There was a dot after that. I am not an angry Black woman, but don't push me.
Yeah.
You see the smile on my face, but if you intend to harm me or my family, I got more Harriet in me than you probably care to know. I am going to end with two things. Quote Dr. Melina Abdullah, once again, Pan-African Studies professor from Cal State Los Angeles, who said, Harriet carried a Winchester. Now, a Winchester is a little too big right now, but every Black woman in America should, you mentioned women in guns, or guns in America, but every Black woman should consider arming themselves for protection. And that's a sad thing to say in this day and age when we are talking about disarming people, gun rights and gun laws, but there is a difference between illegal gun activity and protecting your livelihood. And with that comes the last statement. Protect Black women, ... at all cost.